Okay, so today I'm talking about Gestalt therapy. And so, let's see, the way of being for Gestalt therapy, the role of a counselor, seemed like Fritz himself was a lot more confrontational, but modern Gestalt therapists tend to be more supportive, active, accepting, empathic, gentle, and kind, yet they're still able to confront and challenge the client when necessary. They just try to be a little warmer and more inviting. They're also genuine. They guide clients to gaining self-awareness, and they try to focus on speech patterns and nonverbal behaviors in session. The client in Gestalt therapy must be acceptive of themselves. They have to try to take responsibility for their choices, must be active in the therapeutic process, trying to make their own interpretations and explanations for their behaviors, trying to get their own insight. They must seek out awareness of themselves, must experiment with new behaviors outside of therapy, and try to learn how to influence their environment. The role of the therapeutic relationship in Gestalt therapy is to be interactive. It's very interpersonal relationship, tries to focus on the present moment, wants to produce here and now experiences instead of looking at past situations. Also to establish a partnership where clients can gain awareness of themselves and just facilitate allowing clients to be themselves and not have to put on a mask in the therapeutic session. The way of understanding for Gestalt therapy, the view of human nature is that people have an external world, which constitutes their contacts with other people and other things, and they have an internal world, that's the parts of themselves that the individual either accepts and owns or has disowned. Most individuals can regulate themselves and make good decisions if they have good awareness of themselves and their environments. View of the problem in Gestalt therapy is maladaptive behavior occurs when we're neglecting our needs and not regulating ourselves so that we can return back to our equilibrium when the needs arise. Also, maladaptive behavior can occur when we don't acknowledge or resolve our feelings, when we lack awareness about ourselves or our environments, when we avoid contact with other people or the environment, and I'll talk a little bit more about contact later, or when we block our energy through body tension or displacing energy to other areas. The view of healthy behavior is kind of just really the opposite from what I gathered. It's having a lot of contact with other people in the environment when we're paying attention to our needs and regulating them when they occur, satisfying them so that we can keep that baseline. When we do acknowledge and resolve our feelings, and when we are aware of ourselves and our environments. Goals of the theory. The textbook or the article that you had us read says it's not really goal-oriented, but really the main goal is just to help a client gain awareness about themselves and to accept themselves and their environments and their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's thought, really, I'll just kind of skip ahead to the view of therapeutic change since that's kind of what follows. That really therapeutic change occurs as clients gain awareness of themselves. As clients gain more awareness of themselves and their environments, then they'll kind of just naturally progress and change in a positive direction. Key concepts in Gestalt therapy, there's a lot. Okay, the paradoxical theory of change, that's when people try to change into something that they're not, and they actually become more stuck in their ways. On the other hand, though, when people become aware of who they are and they kind of accept it, then they're more likely to change. That's the paradoxical theory. Then there's holism, and that's the idea that an individual has parts, but really is a unified whole, and no one part of their personality is more important than another. Within holism, there's the idea of the figure, and that is the part of an individual that's at the foreground at the moment. So like, I guess, a predominant emotion like anger would be the figure. That's what you're focusing on, that's at the foreground. And the ground is the aspect of an individual that they are unaware of. So maybe fear is fueling that anger, and that would be like the ground emotion. Field theory is another key concept. That's in order to gain an accurate idea of an individual, they must be observed in their environment, which is why the here and now is so important, because it's the truest representation of the client and their environment. It's the client's interactions with the therapist. The figure formation process is another key concept. That's the idea that individuals separate things into the background and the foreground, which means that certain things are the focus of an individual's attention, the things in the foreground, and others are pushed aside to the background. Organismic self-regulation, that's the idea that we're often faced with needs or sensations that we have to satisfy and we try our best to regulate ourselves and meet those needs in order to return us to our normal baseline selves, which is our selves that aren't being driven by our needs. Okay, how do I pronounce this? Phenomena. Okay, phenomenological inquiry. That's another key concept. That's focusing on the present moment, the now. Unfinished business, that refers to unresolved or unacknowledged feelings or experiences that continue to affect us, especially our emotions. An impasse, that's just the point where the client's stuck. Contact, that is when an individual interacts with their environment or other people through the use of their five senses. Resistances to contact, there's 5 of them. Introjection, that is taking on other people's values or beliefs or imitating their thoughts or actions without analyzing them and altering them to fit for you personally. So it's taking on other aspects of people that don't really match with who you are. Projection, that's the opposite of introjection. That is where someone denies certain facets of themselves and instead applies them to other people, like believing that someone hates you when you actually hate them, or even just blaming other people for your problems. Retroflection, that is turning outward impulses inward. So like if you're angry at other people, you actually turn that anger inward and blame yourself for whatever went wrong. Deflection, that is detouring from contact. It's like avoiding it, sometimes by changing the subject or just avoiding the subject, using humor as a shield, things like that. Confluence, that is when someone doesn't make a clear distinction between themselves and their environment. It's kind of like assuming that other people think how you do, or even changing your thoughts or behaviors to match other people's. It's like avoiding conflict with them, just trying to people please is essentially what I got from it. Ways of intervening in Gestalt therapy. There's a few. The big one is the experiment, and that's a semi-spontaneous technique that's kind of catered to the needs of an individual client. It's meant to take the focus from talking about something to actually doing something. It's kind of the crux of Gestalt therapy. Experiments can be widely different for each client, and neither clients nor counselors know what an experiment is going to actually turn up or teach the client, and they're pretty specific to what the client needs. Then there's the internal dialogue exercise. That's when clients are asked to have different parts of their personalities speak to each other, aka the top dog and the underdog having a conversation. That's the big example they give. But it can just also be like your angry side speaking to your gentle side or something. Then there's the empty chair technique. That's when the counselor sets up an empty chair and has the client speak to it. The chair can represent another person, like a mother or father. It can also represent an aspect of the client's personality, like their anger or even an event. There's making the rounds as a technique. That's primarily used in group therapy. It's when one member of the group goes up to each other member and says something or performs an action. Just sort of depends on what would benefit the individual member. It can be like you say to each member in group why you don't trust them, why you're not comfortable in group, something like that, I think was an example they gave. The reversal exercise, that's having a client do a role play where they adopt a completely different personality characteristics. So a shy person is asked to be really extroverted and just kind of role play that. The rehearsal exercise, and that's when a client speaks aloud, one of the ways in which they rehearse to themselves. So like a lot of times we'll give ourselves pep talks or practice sort of what we're going to say to other people, and it's about just actually doing that out loud to the therapist. There's the exaggeration exercise, which is when a person is asked to exaggerate a body movement or nonverbal gesture just to better see the emotions that are behind it, that are causing it, or to see if it's causing emotions in and of itself. Then there's staying with the feeling, and that's just having a client focus on and stay with an emotion that they would otherwise want to avoid. And finally, there's dream work, which is having a client talk about their dreams, but you let the client analyze and interpret the dream to see what meaning the client gives to the dream. It can also involve asking the client to become different parts of their dreams just to figure out what those parts mean. And that's what I have.